All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Musings Podcast, where my mentor, Abraham Snell, and I are seeking to bring mentorship into the open. So this is episode 7 of the podcast. I cannot believe we actually reached episode 7. It's been quite the journey, yes. And today we're going to mix things up a little bit and talk about a video that I came across during Abraham's and my Red Hat mentoring cycle. And the video is called Designing Your Life by Dave Evans and Bill Burnett. It's available on YouTube, and I'll be sure to link it in the description for this episode so that you all can watch it if you so choose. But I think firstly, I'll just go ahead and provide a summary, including the key points, and then Abraham and I will discuss, and I'll have a few questions prepared to dive into. But the premise of this video is that the idea that you have one calling in life is a dysfunctional belief. And the creators of the video suggest that there are several paths that one can take that can lead to a satisfying life. And you should sample the possible lives before you really go and pursue any one or a combination of them. And so they proposed 3 possible lives that they outlined in the video. The first is your optimized life. The second is your alternate life. And the third is your fascinated life. So I'll go through each of them and talk a little bit about what they entail. So your optimized life is where you increase the time where you feel engaged and energized, and then you reduce the time where you feel disengaged or tired or exhausted, that kind of thing. So they provide an example of, this might be a real person, this might be a hypothetical person, I'm not sure, but a person named Michael who didn't like his job in engineering, and he was considering quitting to go and get his MBA. And so he was encouraged to think of times when he was excited or focused at work, as well as times when he felt drained. And in that reflection process, he actually realized that he liked to work on complex engineering problems, but he didn't like dealing with people whose personalities might be a little difficult or focusing on administrative tasks. So he decided, based on that reflection, not to pursue an MBA and actually to just double down on engineering. So he went and entered a PhD program and became a civil structural engineer. And then now he's able to spend most of his time working alone on these complex engineering problems that he actually enjoys. So the next one is your alternate life. So this is the life that you would lead if your current career just disappeared off the face of the earth, which is kind of funny to think about. And poses the question of what industry would you try to transfer your skills to? So for example, you're an author who writes books, but then everybody just all of a sudden stopped reading books. I don't know if that would be a world that I would want to live in, but basically in that situation, there's no way to make money writing books anymore. So what would you do? It's interesting because in the video, I don't think that your alternate life was really discussed very in depth. And like, it was more so a hypothetical that I haven't really even myself given much thought to. So we can maybe dive into that during the discussion, but that's your alternate life.
It kind of feels like it merges with the one you're about to talk about. They're kind of similar, I guess, other than maybe the time and money part, but you can continue.
Sure. Yes. So the next one is your fascinated life. And the fascinated life is what you would want to do if money and reputation had no role in things. So the narrator of the video, for example, pursued his fascinated life by becoming a YouTube content creator. So he just, kind of deprioritized money and reputation, and then he ended up finding himself fascinated in becoming a YouTube content creator. So that's another example. So those are the 3 lives: the optimized life, the alternate life, and then the fascinated life. And then from there, the video transitions into some other recommendations for designing your life. So one is to keep a quote unquote good time journal to keep track of where you engaged and where you felt energized. And they outlined AEIOU as an acronym to remember things to record in that journal. So activities, environments, interactions, objects, and users. Just a little mnemonic there, I guess. And then it suggested mapping out a 5-year sketch for each of the 3 possible lives. I think 5 years is pretty far in advance, especially since the possible lives are quite abstract. But an interesting suggestion nonetheless. And I think being able to visualize the life ahead of you, I mean, that's really important, right? And then finally, they suggested not to commit before testing your assumptions. I thought this is a really interesting one. So the suggestion is to conduct prototype conversations by interviewing people who are living the kinds of lives that you're interested in. So you could ask them about their life stories, ask them to relive their experiences, and then that could help verify and validate your life designs, or it could maybe deter you from a life that you thought was interesting, but decided later was not. They also suggested talking to people who are both satisfied and dissatisfied, so you could get 2 sides of the same coin and just really understand what you're getting yourself into if you were to pursue a certain path. I thought that this one was really interesting because it actually reminded me a lot of a concept in business and entrepreneurship of like minimum viable products and like testing out your concept before going to market with it. And so just the idea of like applying that similar concept to your own personal path, what's fascinating to me. So I think I'm ready to get into the Q&A portion, Abraham, unless you had any kind of initial thoughts or feedback that you wanted to share about the video.
As he kind of is talking about the 3 different lives, designing your life. One of the ways that I think about that, there's been time I used to do a lot of research and talk a lot on purpose or why am I here? And one of the things that I think about in terms of this is because I agree with the concept that there's no single thing, and I say it like this, that purpose is dynamic. It's not static. So your life's purpose isn't just going to be one thing. Like, somehow as we've learned to, there's this notion that we work all of our time towards this one purpose, right? I am going to be a lawyer, right? Or I am going to be whatever, a millionaire. And the thing is, when you get to that, so what happens? Do you just die? Is it over? No, it's absolutely not over. You keep going, you keep building. But I think if we go into the whole process with the notion that purpose is dynamic and that it flows throughout our lives, I think it causes us to approach things differently. All of that to say, I agree with the concept. And even though I use different wordings for it. The other thing about purpose, though, is I know we're talking about careers here, and that's exactly what he's talking about when he said designing your life. Although I would say that's more designing your career, and your whole life is not your career. And I think that's important to point out, that purpose and career can overlap, but they really don't have to. A lot of people fulfill their life's missions in volunteer roles or roles that are extra outside of their career. The other thing is, when I talk about purpose, it's more than just a skill set. Being a lawyer to me isn't a purpose. A purpose is more like helping people, leadership. It's kind of more general. It's not because, so here's the thing, one day you can't be a lawyer. You're gonna retire unless you lawyer until you die. But most things that are connected to a job end, but your purpose in life doesn't end. And I think those people who find purpose even after they retire live longer and stay engaged. So that's all I would add. Thank you, Sarah.
Sure. I really like the idea of thinking of purpose as this dynamic thing and not something that has to be static your entire life. And I also want to suggest, maybe rather than thinking of each individual goal that you set out toward as a goal, you could think of it as a milestone in service of a larger goal. Not to say that, you have to find a way to kind of like force all of your goals to be in line with each other or to be similar. But that's just another way of thinking about it, right? I mean, sometimes, you reach this goal and like you said, I mean, you might kind of feel like, oh, where do I go now? But if you've got this broader vision in mind, then I think that can, just be as fulfilling, just thinking of it as a stepping stone toward your bigger goal. So some questions that came to mind, and you touched on this a little bit, but if you have other thoughts, would love to hear them. What do you think of this strategy? And then are there any standout points with which you either agree or disagree strongly?
The strategy I think is good, and I'm not here to critique whether it's good or bad, that kind of thing. I agree with the strategy. The good time journal is a good idea, I think. One of the things I think just kind of cautionary is, like, for me, I don't want my things that I really enjoy to be my job per se. I want to literally enjoy my job, but I don't know if I want my leisure thing to be my job. And I'm measuring my words there, because there's some things, like, I enjoy technology. I literally enjoy technology, and it is my job. But there are other things that, like flying drones. But I don't know if I want to do that as my job. I mean, because I feel like at some point it wouldn't be leisure. Like, now I have to be more precise, and I have to be more engaged, and I have to follow some project plan or whatever. And when I fly drones, I just want to do it, right? I just want to do it. I don't want there to be an agenda. So that's what I mean by that. Hopefully that's not confusing. And I think, as it relates to prototyping conversations and those kinds of things, anytime you make decisions, you want as much information as possible. So information-based decisions are always a good idea. So I agree with that as well. So I don't think I have any major, disagreements with it. Yeah, no, I think it's good. What about you? Do you agree, disagree?
Well, that's a really good point about the good time journal that you make, because it's like you don't want to belabor these activities that are meant to be leisurely to begin with. So, if we're writing it out and coming up with a plan, like, isn't your way of, processing things, then maybe there's like another way that is more effective for you, right? So I'm just thinking like recording a voice memo or something like that, where you just kind of talking it out, or even just like drawing something out, like just any way to create it in a format that's more engaging for you. I think that's something to think about when it comes to the good time journal, because not everybody likes just writing down bulleted lists or anything like that. So I happen to be somebody who enjoys journaling, so the idea of the journal is engaging, but at the same time, not everybody thinks the same way. So I think adapting the good time journal to your needs, it would probably be the best way to go about things. Yeah. And I do definitely I do like the prototype conversations idea. It does kind of relate back to mentorship, right? Because a lot of time, if you and your mentor have similar paths and goals, then you can talk through that, talk through the pitfalls and I don't know, the positive aspects of X, Y, and Z path. So yeah, and then I definitely agree with what you said about the maybe the name of the video, like designing your life versus designing your career. And maybe, I don't know, because I'm pretty sure that this video is a part of like a broader book or a piece of work. And maybe they go deeper into the, more like outside of work aspect of things. But for the purposes of the specific video that we're looking at, they definitely talked more about career. So I think it's important to just not tie your identity too closely to your career, if you don't feel inclined to do so. But anyway, can you think of a time when you did something similar to the prototype conversations that were described in the video? And were there any other ways that you used to test your assumptions?
Yeah, so I have mentors, as of course, as you know already, Sarah. But I also there, and I might be mislabeling these, but I do it in different ways. I mean, I receive mentorship in different ways. Some of my mentors are absolutely human being people that I talk to from time to time. Some people I've never met, and they mentor me through their information, through their output. For instance, there is a pastor in the Atlanta area, and a lot of you probably know him. His name is Andy Stanley. So I don't know him personally, but I read his books and I listen to some of his teachings because of the way he shares information. It just kind of resonates with me, but mainly his practicality towards leadership, which is another point that I want to bring. So just like you don't have to literally know a person for mentorship to happen, you don't have to get everything from a person. Like it is possible for you to just glean one thing from a mentor. And not everything else. And I'm not saying choose someone of low character to be your mentor, but this idea that a person has to be perfect in order to mentor you, I don't think that's a good idea either. And so one of my mentors, who is an in-person mentor, um, I get other things from him, but the primary thing I learn from him and I am inspired by him from is the fact that from his childhood, he has kind of set direction and he seems to live out that direction. I don't even know how that works, but he will have a goal in mind and he will reach that goal. And then he'll have another goal in mind and he will reach that goal. When he was like, I forget what age he said he was, but he said he wanted to be a police officer, a soldier, and marry a woman that loves him. He has been at the highest pinnacle of being a police officer. He has been a 3-star general at the highest pinnacle of the military, and he married a woman that absolutely loves him. And how do you even envision that as a child, right? How do you even envision that? But he's done that, stayed on track, and that is one thing that I want to learn to do. I'm never going to be him, obviously, but I uh, I want to be able to set a direction and follow that direction to completion, even if that completion is years away. So yeah, I think I've done some of the prototype, and I've definitely done from a career standpoint. I have shadowed people. I have had conversations, get to knows, those kinds of things. I've done a lot of these things, um, a day in the life of, and I do think they're effective. I think a day in the life of is probably most effective for students who, as students, we are saying we want to be X, Y, and Z, but we have never like done the day to day. And sometimes the day to day can be shockingly different than what we might think. And I don't know if that has, I don't know if you knew what a marketer did day in, day out. And so sometimes you can see it and see like, I wouldn't want to do that for 6 hours because so here's the thing, you might have 2 hours of that thing that you like, but 6 hours of other stuff. And that actually ties back to why I said I'm not sure I want things that I really enjoy to be my job, because the moment they become a job, you wrap them with all these other things. You have timelines, you have in many cases customers, you have reports, you have you know what I mean. And so yeah, I've done a lot of these things, and I think they work. The one thing I would say is which ones work best for you. Um, and so for me, I think that two in particular. One is the whole mentorship, the, the creating relationship and spending time. That works for me because connection is created and more understanding. And then shadowing works too, because I'm a hands-on kind of person.
And when you were talking about how particular aspects of somebody's life can inspire you, it made me think about how I think more and more people these days are saying, like, you should be your own role model. And I do agree with the sentiment of, you should try to live out a life that, you from another like perspective would admire. But I also feel like rejecting other people as role models isn't necessarily the way to go, because looking at other people as role models doesn't mean that you have to replicate everything about them. It just means that, maybe
Right.
a certain aspect of their journey resonates with you and you want to follow along and maybe draw inspiration from that, and not necessarily copy it, but just use it as a source of motivation or ideas. So that resonated with me. Did you have something?
Sarah, we're probably going to get email about this comment that I'm about to make. I don't mean to be controversial, but that sounds like a Gen Z thing to say, be your own mentor. Okay, so to me, that makes no sense. How can you be your own role model? Because we all have blind spots, right? I mean, I don't really get that, but I'm sure somebody's gonna send you some email saying, you know, that we're just
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no. I go ahead. I'm looking to hear some explanation of that.
Sure. I think that the thinking behind it is that people want to trailblaze their own path and not live their life a certain way because somebody else did it. And I think it's just basically saying, don't try to emulate somebody else too closely. Um, but I feel like the wording of it is a little bit oversimplifying, because again, like you can still have mentors, you can still have role models, but then trailblaze your own path. So I think I would probably reword it: be your own role model, but consider other role models and whatever parts of their lives resonate with you. I'd say something along those lines, as opposed to just bar none, be your own role model.
So Sarah, when I think about someone as a role model or even mentorship, I don't think about mimicking them. I think about insight. Like, look, I can definitely say I don't think you mimic me at all. I think you get insight and you go, oh, I didn't think about it that way. So, so to me, mentorship and role models are there as guideposts,
Sure.
because it's not going to work the same way for you if you mimic somebody anyway. That
Right.
just doesn't work out, Now, so take the example of a basketball player, right? So
Mhm.
I am. Let's use LeBron, and I don't know LeBron, okay, or his son Bronny, right?
Okay.
But most rational people would think that some way, somehow, LeBron has mentored Bronny, right? Has probably served as a role model, being his dad. That's not always the case, but a lot of times, you idolize your dad. That might even be why he went into basketball. But I don't see him literally trying to mimic what his father did. I'd see him trying to be his own person. And I think it's probably even when you have a superstar parent, it's probably even more of a drive for you to blaze your own trail. But how helpful is it to have someone who's done it, right? How helpful is it to have someone to, even if you go against their advice, at least you know what could happen, right? If he says, son, you should probably shoot 5,000 jump shots, I'm just making something up. And he goes, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I think it's probably important for me to shoot shots, but I'm a defensive kid and I want to do that. Okay, well, yeah, but the mentorship, the guidance was still there, right? There's still, and so that's my thought. Anyway, I won't belabor the time on that, but saying that, and that's probably because I am Gen X and Gen Z things don't always make sense to me. And I'm sure vice versa.
One other thing that I had with regard to this question was what you talked about with regard to day in the life. The day in the life dialogue was interesting to me because now that I think about it, I mean, I remember doing a little bit of like shadowing back in my maybe high school years, but from like college onward, I was interviewing for these jobs, but I really had no idea what a day in the life was like. Um, and I think that's kind of tough to execute from a business perspective. A lot of the aspects of your day in the life are involve confidential information that you can't share more broadly with people who are outside of the company. So it's like, how do you give people a real insight into what the day in the life looks like without, compromising sensitive information? And I've had like several meetings, with different people who wanted to chat about my experience at Red Hat, and I can do my best to, explain what it was like, but kind of difficult to provide that same experience again in a business context. So I think that's just something I want to ponder later. Another thing is that increasingly like the day in the life is a virtual life, right? So as opposed to being able to shadow somebody in person, like when I think of shadowing, I think of like joining somebody on their way to the office, right? And just being in the office with them all day, but that's not really the case typically anymore. I mean, you'd be shadowing somebody, but maybe you could like hop in on calls, that sort of thing. So I think we should find a way to adapt that concept to like what modern work looks like.
And really, the day in the life, even though it should probably, it is something that I think benefits college students, but I 100% agree with you that logistically it's hard. I can't remember if I did a day in the life when I was in college. I don't think I did. But most of the day in the life stuff was from me being inside the company already, just in a different role. And it was easy for me to kind of go over to someone else's desk and see what they were doing. And so I 100% agree with you. The other thing about the day in the life of, though, is it could be painfully boring. So like I sometimes spend an hour of my day writing code. That is, and it is not very productive if I'm writing code and trying to talk to somebody at the same time. That would become more of an instructional session when you like, this is what this code does and all that. So, it could be that, but some of the stuff we do during our day, creating a spreadsheet, returning emails, that's not very appealing. So you don't want someone just sitting at your desk or whatever while you return emails. So I agree with you. Logistically, it is not probably the best one to do, but for me, it was one of the most effective because it literally gave me an idea of what I would be expected to do.
Yeah, and hey, I mean, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to expose people to the more mundane aspects of your work, right? Because if somebody's not prepared for that, then it could come as a shock to them later on. So nothing wrong in preparing people for their possible future, just like we were talking about, in the concept of designing your life. But anyway, yeah, I have another question here. It's watching the video, I started thinking that the optimized life seems a little bit difficult to replicate in real life, kind of like what we were just talking about, right? Because the nature of your job, it's going to change depending on what projects you're working on. And I feel like it's kind of impossible to avoid doing things that you don't want to do 100% of the time. So do you think it's possible to optimize your day-to-day work?
I do think it's possible to optimize our day-to-day work. But to your point, your day-to-day work can't just be 1, 2, or 3 things, right? It's the idea of working, right? It's just daily, there are things that just have to be done, whether it's some kind of communication. We just talked about returning answers to emails or doing or filling out a report. Even when I think about the military, for instance, there are some days. So when I was in the infantry, there were some days, maybe a day, where we would practice an attack. We would practice doing the thing. And so, yeah, we would spend 8 hours in that day going through how an attack works, coming back, debriefing, doing another attack, coming back, debriefing. And that day might be very active and moving. But then all of the information that we gathered, somebody had to go back and compile that and talk about, okay, here are the places we can improve, all of those things. That was paperwork day, right? That's not as much fun for most people. It's for some, but I don't think there's a way to just do the thing you like all day long. And then, there's the aspect of you're not. Some people might work alone if they own their own business and their whatever, or their job causes them to be in some way an individual contributor. But the vast majority of people work with someone else. And so sometimes it's not necessarily the mundane things that people don't like, but it's the personality clashes that happen. You probably can appreciate this yourself, the beauty of having a good team where everybody just clicks, because there are a lot of teams where everybody don't click. And that doesn't mean I'm taking sides. It just means personalities don't always mesh. And so that's one part of it. I think it's possible to make your day. And what I mean by that is your attitude towards the way you approach your work day. I think if you take a positive attitude into what you're doing, then your day will be positive. Even doing the mundane things, even navigating personalities, even we hear this a lot when things that we're instructed to do don't make sense. I think having that good attitude is a game changer. That's probably the biggest game changer, Sarah, is how am I going to approach my day, each aspect of my day? When my day starts to veer in a negative direction, how am I going to approach that? So, yeah, I think that's my answer. Hopefully I answered that.
Yeah, you definitely answered the question. And as you were answering, it got me thinking about how people say, there are years that ask questions and years that answer. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but I feel like there are days that ask questions and there are days that answer sometimes, because there are days where, again, you're not doing what energizes you, but you can make your day by trying to reflect on how what you might have done in that less enjoyable day can segue into or contribute to your next, more enjoyable day, right? Going through like those lines of code, I assume that, that hour of coding and like going back and forth and, trying to figure out, what belongs in the code, what doesn't, eventually led to, something more enjoyable for you, right? Like having a conversation with your team about it or talking to a customer about it, that sort of thing. For those more mundane or less enjoyable days, like just trying to think through how what you did that day was in service of your optimized day.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it is for the most part. We all know there are things that seemingly don't make sense and don't point to our work. But I would say the majority of the things we do point to our work. They make up our working day, right? And so even though they may be less enjoyable, again, they have to be done, right? I used to think, why do we need to use spreadsheets? Can we just not ever use spreadsheets? But that was just me, and within me, I knew that doesn't make sense, right? Because there are things that have to be captured, have to be compared, information has to be recorded, and so. But just because of my personal frustration with just having to parse through spreadsheets, part of that is just a maturity, right? When this has to be done, it just has to be done. It kind of reminds me of waking up my son. It's just like Groundhog Day because he doesn't want to get up, but he plays football. And we didn't force him to play football. That was his choice. And so with that comes waking up early because football practice is early in the morning. And it's the same thing for us, for the most part, we choose what we do. And once we choose it, there's a maturity that says, okay, I don't really like this, but it has to be done. Let me go do it. Let me go do a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
You gotta do what you gotta do so you can do the things that you want to do, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's a good place to conclude the episode. As always, just want to thank everybody for listening and let them know that you can tune in to future episodes on YouTube and Spotify. And we'll also be sure to share any new episodes via LinkedIn. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Have a great day, everybody.